since 2016, while the number directly employed only grew by 3.8% in that period. Deputy Rabbit says children are losing out because of a recruitment and retention crisis in the Child and Family Agency.
This is a short-term solution which will have a long-term damage on the children and the agency.
That's it for now. All news updates are on our website. That's newstalk.com.
Newstalk weather.
Thanks to the AA, you can find our lowest car insurance price online, guaranteed.
Overcast, misty conditions with heavy rain in the east for a time, becoming brighter from the west with sunny spells and showers. Top temperatures 11 to 14 degrees. Now you're up to date on Newstalk.
Off the ball. This is Newstalk.
All right, you're very welcome back. Neil Treacy here with you this afternoon until 7 o'clock on Off the Ball this evening. Get your texts into us on 53106. At the moment, we're looking back on Ireland's win against Samoa yesterday and ahead to what is now a World Cup quarter-final against, confirmed for definite, New Zealand after Japan's 28 points to 21 win against Scotland this morning in Yokohama. That game going ahead after a lot of concern over the last few days about Typhoon Hagibis, but it did go ahead and Japan have booked their place in the quarterfinals, winning that pool. They'll go on to take on South Africa, and Ireland will be up against New Zealand this coming Saturday. So joining me on the line to talk about Ireland's performance yesterday and what we're going to expect over the next week or so, Brian O'Driscoll is on the line. Brian, afternoon.
Afternoon, how's things, Neil?
Not too bad. And Mike Ross as well, another former Irish international, is joining us on the line. Mike, how are you today?
Good, Neil, how are you?
Guys, Brian, I might start with you first. Before we even get on to Ireland this morning, I think everyone was grateful that the Scotland and Japan game got the go-ahead to go through, and we didn't have a situation where Japan were going into the quarterfinals by default. In fairness to Japan, when they went out onto the pitch, they left us in little doubt that they were deserving of a place in the last 8.
Yeah, it was, first of all, from a credibility point of view with the tournament, with that being the one pool that was very much in the balance. It was important that game, was played, be it in front of a packed stadium or behind closed doors. It just needed to be played. You have to give everyone the opportunity of qualifying. That said, I suppose Italy weren't given their opportunity. They could have gotten an unlikely 5 points against New Zealand and still technically qualified, but this one, particularly the host nation as well, with their first opportunity to get into the knockout stages, there would have been an asterisk around it had they managed to get a bye with a drawn match in these circumstances and found their way in topping the group that way. They will equally have been delighted to be able to go out and put in the performance that they did against a very pumped up Scottish team that just simply didn't have the answers for them in that first half. And yeah, it was a very important aspect for the overall integrity of the competition that it did go ahead.
And I think in terms of the legacy of the tournament as well, Brian, I mean, not so much even the fact that this game has gone ahead, but that they now have the nice story to go alongside it, that the hosts Japan are through to the quarterfinals for the very first time. And
totally deserving of it. They are arguably playing the best brand of rugby in the World Cup. It's so good to watch. The Kiwis would probably say something about that, but I think when Ireland were playing against them, of course, you didn't want to be on the receiving end and be the team to break the big story of the World Cup in beating the favourites for the pool. But today, even though we probably would have preferred Scotland to have won and for us to finish top and play South Africa, it was very difficult not to cheer them on because their brand of rugby is so enthusiastic, it's so high tempo, full of energy. Their passing is crisp and accurate, and they just play an outstanding brand that we come to watch at Rugby World Cup. And I suppose you counter that with some of the rugby that we have seen. They're a breath of fresh air and totally deserving of getting into a quarterfinal. And you'll definitely feel as though they don't think that their time is up yet. They will give South Africa an absolute run for their money if they play like they did against Ireland or against Scotland today in that quarterfinal. Mark my words. So it's great for the development of the game. It's obviously great for the tournament because being hosted in Asia to get local support and Wouldn't it be absolutely incredible if they managed to find their way into a semi-final? But one game at a time, and South Africa will definitely need to do their homework, because these are no pushovers.
Yeah, and Mike, obviously South Africa will know full well just how dangerous Japan can be based on the last World Cup. How much of a chance would you give them going into a quarter-final now against South Africa? I know Brian there was saying they'll be putting absolutely everything into it, and it's by no means going to be a South African walkover.
Judging by what I saw today, I think they've absolutely every chance. Now, South Africa have been playing very well, especially in the first half hour against New Zealand in the opening match, but they might have too much for Japan physically. But if Japan can play like that and keep the ball alive, and that was hugely impressive. It wasn't just a flash in the pan against Ireland. They continued in that form against Scotland, and Scotland were lucky to come back with 2 tries at the end, I thought.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of game plan, even I imagine South Africa will kind of be lining up roughly kind of in the same game plan that Ireland would have taken on Japan against. We saw how that would have gone, Mike, and is that where Japan could is that where they could kind of topple them? Yeah,
Brian knows a bit more about this than I do, but it was the offloading, the lines they're running, just the ability to get the ball clear, and some of their tries were top drawer. Even in the physical stakes, I mean, they were knocking Scotland back on the game line. So, whatever they've been doing in the lead up for the World Cup, it certainly worked.
Oh, sorry about that there, guys. The microphone seems to be a bit all over the place. I don't know what happened. Brian, back to Ireland though. Obviously, you were saying it felt a bit strange watching Japan and feeling delighted with them, knowing that it meant that we were going to be playing New Zealand in the quarterfinals. How do you expect that to be going now over the next week or so? It's obviously never got through to a World Cup semi-final before, and it's going to be the toughest job we've ever had of getting there. Yeah,
it was definitely on the basis of what we've seen so far in this World Cup. It was definitely it's definitely the more difficult quarter-final route. They've been playing some pretty high tempo stuff themselves. That said, you could look at it a couple of different ways. The time to get New Zealand in the past has been early on. When they get to finals, they tend to win them, except for that 95 trip when half their team were under the weather for an apparent poisoning scandal, and yet they still nearly managed to win it. Whereas where they become unstuck has been at a quarter-final and semi-final level, and they're a team, obviously, like lots of sides, they're a team of momentum. They haven't had to do a whole lot yet. They'd won big game against South Africa in their pool, but the rest of them, they've absolutely coasted to significant victories. So maybe you look at them, are they a little bit undercooked, having not had a tough game for 3 weeks? Listen, we'll try and take that angle. But they'll know that they'll have a proper test match next week. I think they would have fancied the other quarter-final initially, although the way Japan are playing, I don't know if anyone wants them right now, but it's become a tougher test match to get into the semi-final because of the record, because of the history, because it's the first time that Ireland will be coming into a World Cup and playing New Zealand, having beaten them in the past, so they do know how to do it. But Ireland are going to have to definitely play comfortably their best performance of 2019, significantly better than against Scotland or anything else they've played in this calendar year to stand a chance. It's where Ireland need to be in a quarter-final, but this is ultimately their final now.
Mm-hmm. And Mike, even we've just finished up our Sunday pay-per-view here, and one of the pieces we were talking about, Stuart Barnes today in the Sunday Times, his headline, "Not even the All Blacks will want to face this giant green monster." He goes on to say, "A giant green monster capable of sucking the very air out of a game of rugby. The incremental inch by inch of their pick and drive, the patience to pound forward, body length by body length, leave to lightning footwork to others. CJ Stander and co come at you front on and they keep coming. No wonder Joe Schmidt's men have beaten the All Blacks twice in recent history." It's not the most glowing of praise for the way Ireland play, but he is kind of pointing out that, they've beaten New Zealand a couple of times in the last few years, and they've beaten them with a particular brand of rugby.
Yeah, but you have to be absolutely on your game to execute that. And certainly in 28 this time last year, they were at that level. I think they've come off a couple of percent since then, but there's no bigger carrot in a World Cup quarter final than New Zealand's, because generally if you're going to win the World Cup, you're going to have to beat New Zealand at some stage. So, and as Dricko said, the quarterfinals tend to be where they often come unstuck. I mean, I remember 1999 when France did them at La Maison, and I think it was 2007 where France did the same again. So, there's an opportunity there for Ireland. They're battle hardened essentially, but at the same time, New Zealand can punish you like no other team if you don't quite get it right.
Yeah, and I think as Stuart Barnes points out as well, that's that game against France in 2007. That's the last time they were actually beaten in a World Cup. But he's kind of saying just why any neutral would want this percentage rugby to prevail over the panache of the defending champions is a mystery, other than everyone's chances rise when New Zealand fall. And as you say, Ireland are going to have to beat New Zealand in a World Cup more than likely if they're to win it. And everyone else is probably going to want them to do it as well, not because it's a great story for Ireland, but Brian, it increases their own chances probably of winning it if New Zealand aren't around.
You want the best team taken out by somebody else. You don't want to have to do it yourself. And that is a saying that we turn back to a lot, that you're going to need to beat New Zealand to win a World Cup. That wasn't the case with England in 2003, that Australia managed to get the job done against them. So if someone can do you a favour, well, all the better. The only thing that Ireland do have to do is they have to go the harder route of the draw now. The likelihood, looking at the form that England are in versus Australia, if you say that England will probably win that one, again, you've got another titanic battle for whoever gets into that semi-final. But I guess we'll worry about that one for another day. But finishing first in this pool had a carrot in that it definitely was an easier in inverted commas route to the last four. They're going to have to do it the hard way, but they'll feel as though you look at a number of these Irish players, like a lot of them have beaten the All Blacks 3 times and drawn once. Well, not a lot of them, certainly 4 or 5 of them have beaten them 3 times and drawn once in the last 3 or 4 years, be it via the Lions and with Ireland as well. The other games, there's been nothing between them as well. So the hoodoo is definitely gone, but I think there's still a huge, bigger than healthy respect for them because of what they've managed to achieve over the course of the game. And they'll still be firm favourites to do a job in Ireland, particularly the way Ireland have stuttered a bit in this Rugby World Cup. But in a one-off game, knowing what Joe Schmidt will have them primed to do and get the mental side of the game right and get their defence right, Ireland will prove to make themselves difficult to beat. And the All Blacks will need to be firing to get off to a victory. The discipline that Ireland have shown again, I think it was 5 penalties, 2 in the second half in the Samoan game, is more in tune with the Irish team we expect. And so when you're giving away very few penalties, it's hard for teams to get into the game, and that's where aspects like your kicking game will be vitally important. The transition is New Zealand's greatest attacking weapon, their ability to be able to score tries from kicked away possession or from turnover balls. So Ireland will have to be more miserly than ever and absolutely kick on their own terms when they do come up against them. But it's an exciting prospect. I think the shackles will be off if we got to a semi-final, so leave nothing behind.
Mike, I'm curious to get your opinion as well. Obviously, in terms of quarter-final and Ireland never having won one before, you would have been involved in the last 2 squads. Going out against Argentina and Wales, heading into those games even, did you feel the actual weight of expectation of, we've never been beyond this stage before?
A small bit. I mean, it was just, we looked at it as an opportunity to do what no other team had done before. Mm-hmm. In that way, I think of the 2, Wales is probably the more disappointing one because we had a fully fit and a ready squad to choose from pretty much. Against Argentina, we're down 5 members of the squad, as everyone knows, but against Wales, we played them week in, week out in the different provincial competitions and also in the Six Nations, so we knew what we were facing. Look, everyone in the Irish squad will know that there's an opportunity to make history here. They're going to have to do it the hard way, but I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, and Brian, do you think that would actually be weighing on their minds a little heading into next week, or is it almost the fact that you're going up against the All Blacks to begin with? you're not really thinking we have to be the first team to get through to a quarter-final. It's very much All Blacks orientated, because you're not really the favourites for this game whatsoever.
No, you're not. And yeah, in the back of their minds, of course, coming into this World Cup, they wanted to do what no other Irish team has done. But you got to put that aside now and not worry about it. If you let that take grip of you, I think you'll forget about the job in hand. This is just one 80-minute performance against the All Blacks. There's nothing after this if they don't win. So it's very easy to have tunnel vision on a game, particularly when you're playing the opposition of the All Blacks quality. So listen, we've talked about Joe Schmidt's legacy, about getting into will it be dependent on getting into a semi-final? Well, it's just gotten tougher having to go via the All Blacks. But imagine if they did manage to do it. Imagine what that legacy how it would grow by doing it the hard way. And I've said it the whole time that it will happen Ireland at some stage. We'll get to a semi-final, and we've wanted sooner rather than later. But you definitely feel that if Ireland are capable, if Ireland can produce a huge performance, that no team would then want to get them. And it is this big green machine that Stuart Barnes talked about. It hasn't been firing like we've seen over the last couple of years. But if they can get back to that level of accuracy that we've seen, getting them to claim the number one spot in the world, well, they make themselves a difficult team to beat. And that's all you can do against the best players in the world. Just make it hard and then take your opportunity. If we are to win, it'll be a one-score game. I'm waiting to see what the Joe Schmidt nuances will be. We saw one against them in Dublin with the Jacob Stockdale try. That was the difference between the teams. That little switch play down the blind side, manipulating the defence and getting Ben Smith out of position, and expect something like that again. Joe will be able to think his way around the game plan and what tactics to use. You just have to get the mental part of the game right, and hopefully the physical part will follow.
And what areas of the game yesterday impressed you? 47-5 win. I think it was 7 tries in the end. What particular elements of play did you enjoy?
I thought we came onto the ball a lot more. I think we were less inclined to try and get back into our systems of setting up pods off rucks and getting into our shape. I think particularly when you make some inroads, I think you have an ability to just play heads up rugby, and the ball carrying was a lot more effective. There was much better late footwork at the line, getting to soft shoulders, and the knock-on effects. You get front foot ball and quicker rucks, and then the game gets much, much easier. And you could see it where the halfback started to dictate play. Johnny played very well. He had the ball on a string and knew exactly what to do with it. There's quality of passing and getting it on the score sheet himself a couple of times. So he's a player that's clearly brimming with confidence. Our stat pack yesterday told us that Ireland's last 19 games that he's been involved in, we've won 17 of them. Other than that, Wales and an English performance. So you look at what he brings to the team. He is more vital than ever, and we need him having one of those games if we're to stand any chance against the All Blacks.
Mike, is that one thing that would give you a bit of optimism coming into this weekend, the form that Sexton seems to be in over the last 4 weeks?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's critical to us progressing his form. Johnny controls so much of the game. He's such a big leader within the squad that when he's on fire, it gives confidence to the rest of the team. Same with himself and Conor Murray. You got that access guiding you around the pitch and putting you into the right areas, and you had the forward. That's all you want, and you're very happy with it.
Joey Carberry came on yesterday, played fairly well, put in that lovely grubber kick in through for Andrew Conway to score his try. If something were to happen to Johnny Sexton, say 15-20 minutes into a quarter-final against New Zealand next week, Mike, how would you be feeling about Joey Carberry coming in? Does he look like he's up to match speed?
I think so. I mean, he offers something a bit more probably of a running threat than Johnny is, but he's all skills, and we've seen that time and again. And wasn't a bad deputy for Johnny when the time we won it over in Chicago, which was very early days in his career. And I think Joe will have a look to them in training, and whoever's between himself and Jack Carty, who's ever training better, they'll get the nod, I'd say.
Brian, I'm reading Shane Horgan as well here this morning. He says, I don't expect to see Joey Carberry in the starting lineup, and that pains me. When he came on yesterday, he oozed class. I love the way he avoids contact, not because he has a problem with collisions, but because he's so aware of space and its value. His grubber kick in for Andrew Conway's try was further evidence of his astute rugby brain. He seems to be suggesting that he would actually like to have Joey Carberry and Johnny Sexton in the same 15. Is that... probably at this stage of a World Cup, is that a bit of a notion of fancy?
Yeah, I think it is. I think if you were going to do that, it needed to be done at an earlier juncture, probably Six Nations, rather than even the warm-up games. We didn't. Maybe the grand plan for Joe was to try that out in one of those first four warm-up games, with Joey getting his injury in game one, ruled that out, and as a result has kind of put the kibosh on him getting any more game time than he has done. I love that idea of the second playmaker as well. You look at how well it's worked with Mwanga and Barrett. You look at how often New Zealand are trying to get to the middle of the park to stop the defensive line speed that you see coming from team playing to the edges, and you get to the middle of the park. Tight five forwards on one side or the other, and when you have the ability of two ball players to be able to play first receiver or play on the same side as first and second receiver, you've way more opportunity for pulling apart those defensive lines. So I love the idea of that as well, but I think it is fanciful for this World Cup. Even with Jordan Larmour's great performance at the weekend, I still would anticipate for a World Cup quarterfinal, if Rob Kearney's fit, that he's going to be playing at fullback. And I don't think you're going to all of a sudden see a Joey Carberry playing inside or outside Johnny Sexton in a 12 role, having never played there before. So it'll be back to the tried and trusted, depending on what comes of Bundy Aki. I still fancy Joe will go with Henshaw and Ringrose, and Carney at fullback, and then revert back to what they did so well against the All Blacks back in November, and remind themselves of why they were so effective and why they got the victory. And it'll be more of that.
Mike, on Bundy Aki's red card that Brian just mentioned there as well, is it fanciful at this stage to think that he would be available for next weekend?
I don't know. I mean, judging by what's been happening so far in the disciplinary hearings, he's probably looking at 3 weeks. Now, I felt it was quite harsh, and I said as much at the time when it happened. I mean, I think they're kind of taking the human factor out of the game a little bit, because if you look at the situation, I mean, the ball, it was a breaking ball, guy scooped it up, probably stooped to pick it up, and Bundy's had to react in a split second to it. And he hasn't followed through. He's wrapped his arms, but he's just been a few inches too high. So maybe that'll be a mitigating factor. I don't know, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with the judicial hearing this week.
Brian, your thoughts on it?
I thought it was a red card on the basis of what we've seen so far this World Cup. They said that World Rugby, when they when Alain Roland met with the media beforehand, talked about how there was potentially going to be some harsh yellow and red cards, and I personally thought the yellow card that Samoa got in the game was a harsher call than the red card that Bundy got. I thought that on the basis of what we've seen so far in the World Cup, it was a high shot. There definitely wasn't enough mitigating circumstances. Yes, it was a reactionary piece. There's no malice involved in it. But if it's dangerous and you can't find some mitigation there, well, the only option for the referee is to issue a red card. And the yellow card, I don't know what Lamb, the hooker, could have done more. I think when players lead themselves with the head, and if you look at how Lamb had bent his knees and where his collision point was, and then Stockdale leads, his first point of contact is going to be head. I think it's very, very hard for any player to do anything on a head-on collision like that. And I think World Rugby have gotten themselves into a little bit of a fix on that now. Us as pundits, and I'm sure people at home, are scratching their heads wondering what colour card is going to be. And thankfully we saw a head collision today in the Scotland Japan game with Gray and the Japanese hooker, and common sense prevailed where head on head is just complete accident. yeah, it is a little bit of a mess, and I think we're definitely at a seminal moment of the game of something drastic is going to have to change, because we're going to see more and more games ending with 14 men or 13 men. You're going to see more and more red cards until there's a complete revamp of what the tackling acceptance is going to be, or the contact area is going to be, and perhaps we're coming into a time where it'll be back to below waist height of contact area, and as a result the game will completely modify itself. I don't know. The answer is I don't really know where we're going with it, but at the moment it's a little bit of a mess. I know that Derek Hegarty is travelling out now, is probably just about landing, who works with William Fry, who's represented a lot of the Leinster and Munster players and some Ireland players over the course of the last few years. He obviously was a professional rugby player himself, so has that understanding, as well as the understanding from a lawyer perspective. But I think it might be a bit of an uphill battle based on what the Samoan boys were suspended with early on in the tournament.
Yeah. So if we're assuming that that Bundyaki is going to be suspended, are we assuming then it's Robbie Henshaw and Gary Ringrose in the centre? Does Henshaw keep his place, or is Chris Farrell putting him under any pressure?
Well, Henshaw looked like a guy that hadn't played a lot of rugby. He made a couple of errors. He started the game quite well. Did the simple things very well. Got a really great latch on a ball carry from Bundy, leading up to the Tyg Furlong try. Lengthened that ruck, and as a result, Alatoa, who was trying to come around the corner, didn't manage to set the line as quickly as he would have wanted to, because his legs got caught coming around to get into the third defender slot, and that's why Tyg managed to win the impact. And they're the small things that coaches really enjoy. But then, other aspects, he dropped a few balls and gave away a cheap penalty. When he thought the ball was out when it clearly wasn't. And, there are things that annoy coaches. So I don't know what the situation with Chris Farrell is. Obviously, he's fully recovered from his concussion or from his failed HIA. So I think it'll certainly be interesting, and depends on what happens at training this week. Joe definitely favours Henshaw above Farrell, but will his performance at the weekend be enough to give him a second outing? I think probably yes, but it'll be a close run thing.
Aside from Henshaw's rustiness, Mike, was there any other bits and pieces that kind of worried you a little bit yesterday?
Well, given the red card happened about 20 minutes in, I thought it was a job well done, in fairness. I mean, I quite, with my prop hat on, I quite enjoyed seeing them all going well. They did put pressure on Samoa at times in the scrum. But, they scored 40-odd points. They only conceded one try, and that was a bulk of the match with 14 men. So, it was a good professional performance. To Robbie, yeah, look, it's his first game back in a while, but he's a quality player. So I back him to shaking the rustiness off this week and be good to go next week.
Yeah, and alongside Gary Ringrose there in the centre. Other selection calls, how did we think Tyg Byrne got on yesterday? Are we kind of expecting that it would be Peter O'Mahony back in for him next week?
You fire away with that one, Rossi.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Like Pete, if you think of the back row that played last year against New Zealand, Pete was an absolute hero in that. So I think New Zealand might be a good match for him to be playing. And then, I think it's going to be Pete, CJ, and Josh. Although Reece Ruddock certainly put his hand up, and then you've Tyg Byrne as well. So I'm glad I'm not picking that this weekend.
And Brian?
Yeah, we were kind of mulling it over. Paul O'Connell was in the studio at ITV yesterday with me, and he was mulling over whether Reece was being held back for the quarterfinal game, not being involved this week. When you have a man of the match performance, and we didn't play brilliantly against Russia, but he was a standout performer. He's never let us down. Was his powder being kept dry for what's going to be an absolutely enormous battle now against the New Zealand back row? And Ardi Sevilla playing on that blind side. That said, to Mike's point there, Pete was man of the match, and coaches look back to man of the match in November against the All Blacks, and coaches look back to previous games and when you've done a job for you. And Joe Schmidt, more than anyone else, has looked back to players that he's relied upon. He did it in his early years in Ireland with the Leinster players, picking in 50-50 calls. Nearly always went with Leinster players because they were tried and tested and because they'd won with them. And now, when you look back to, it's a bit like a golfer, playing on a favourite golf course. It's like they mightn't have any form going into it, but when when Graham McDowell goes back to where did he win the US Open? Pebble Beach. Immediately start playing well again. Is it a little bit like that as well with a player that had great memories of the last time they played against opposition? Does that mean, do you know what, I love New Zealand's great battle? Give me the jersey again and I'll produce a similar performance. So I fancy he'll probably go with Pete on the basis of plenty of credit in the bank, even though he hasn't been at his best in this Rugby World Cup.
Before we leave you go, gents, as well, so the quarterfinal lineup is officially confirmed. So you've Ireland and New Zealand this Saturday morning. That is shortly after England and Australia. Wales against France then on Sunday morning, followed by Japan, South Africa. You kind of touched on them earlier on as well, England, Australia. I'm kind of looking forward to this one just as much for Eddie Jones against Michael Cheika as I am the two teams on the pitch. You're edging towards England there?
I'm edging towards England. I just think it'll be a good game. Don't get me wrong. I just feel as though England are still going through the gears. I think now that they're getting to knockout stage, they should be brimming. I think Owen Farrell still hasn't hit the ground running properly. George Ford has been the one that's been getting the headlines. And so a player of Farrell's calibre, you'd imagine that he won't be quiet for much longer. So expect a big performance from the likes of him. Big question mark as to whether Billy Vunipola is going to be fit. They weren't sure. They didn't think that he was going to get to play against France, but he's had an extra week to rehab his ankle. And he's a huge player for them and will be going forward if they're to win this trophy. So I fancy England will have too much just on the basis of their power game, and up front I think they'll have it over Australia. It'll be really interesting to see two good backlines going at one another. Great quality of passers, good, really good set plays. So definitely defences will have to be on their toes. But I fancy Eddie Jones will win out on his old team.
And finally then, Mike, Wales, France on Sunday morning. Wales have kind of they've been hot and cold at various times in various matches as well. Even today, I know they had their first place wrapped up already coming into this game, but only 7-6 in front at half time against Uruguay. Granted, they kicked on afterwards. France coming in off the back of a week's rest, but obviously it is France and they've had, a bit of trouble in the camp if we're led to believe, and, at various stages against the USA and against Tonga, they really, really didn't look particularly good. I'm struggling to figure out what way I'm leaning on this one.
Yeah, it is a tough one. We've such a cliche with France to say which ones are going to turn up. I remember watching them in the first half against Argentina and thinking, God, we've forgotten that they could do this. and then the other games didn't kind of reach those heights again. That's it. I think I fancy Wales to beat France in this. I think they'll probably be, Warren Gatland is usually really good at coming up with these one-off games, and I think that Wales will have enough to go past France. All
right, guys, thanks a million for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks, Neil. Cheers.
Brian O'Driscoll and Mike Ross there looking back on Ireland's bonus point win against Samoa and ahead at the World Cup quarter-final against New Zealand next week. Obviously on the other side of the draw, it's going to be Japan against South Africa. That's after Japan booked their place as the winner of Pool A this morning with a 28 points to 21 bonus point win against Scotland. So they are going through top of the pool. What a brilliant story after a difficult week for all at the Rugby World Cup. But we will check in with our man in Japan, Owen Sheehan, after the break. And just a reminder as well, our rugby coverage here on Off the Ball is brought to you by Vodafone. Team of us, everyone in. We'll be back in a moment.
Off the Ball
on News Talk. This week on News Talk, as part of the Government of Ireland's No Excuses campaign, we're saying enough is enough.